それでは若林様。
Well, we would like to ask Mr. Wakabayashi to take over. How do you do? My name is Wakabayashi from Wired Magazine. Best of regards. It was a very interesting presentation. Listening to a presentation like this, how should I say it? I want to pursue more dreams, but I tend to forget things the day after. In Wired Magazine, well, there's Chief Editor Chris Anderson in the United States that runs the US Wired Magazine, and he was editing for a long time, but he decided to start up a drone company, so he left. His book is quite famous. There's a book called Makers, and he decided to pursue his ideas that he wrote in his book in his own life. And 3 years ago, we invited Chris Anderson to talk about the Maker Movement. And he said that everybody was going to be involved in the making process. And everybody could be the next Matsushita or the next Sony. We appreciated his words. That was 3 years ago that he said that, but it's quite difficult to realize what he talked about. And then after that, we've seen the Maker Movement and open innovation. These are commonly used words, but in society, it has not yet become a major trend. And so people are feeling quite frustrated. And that's what I've been feeling for the past 3 years. But listening to today's presentation, I'm astonished at what America is able to accomplish. And I'd like to ask a few questions today. Why is it that we can't realize a situation like that in Japan is something that I'm always thinking about? I find it difficult as I listen to presentations like this. And in regard to TechShop, the customers are what kind of people? I'd like to understand what are the type of people who come to tech shops. And so in regard to the people who come to tech shops, what are the common type of people who come?
Five basic types of folks that come in. It's a custom demographic. The first is hobbyists, and these are people who like model trains or 3D printers or drones or clothing or whatever. They've got a hobby. It heats, H-E-A-T-S, so hobbyist entrepreneurs, artists, tinkerers, and students. Those are the basic five. The entrepreneurs fall into three categories. There's the real serious entrepreneur who has venture capital funding or wants to get venture capital funding and they want to have a big exit or acquisition. Then there's a significant portion of entrepreneurs who I describe and others describe as a lifestyle business. So Max, the Lumia lamp, is a lifestyle business. He's never going to be able to go public. He may do $10 or $15 million in sales, which isn't enough for an angel group or a venture capital group to get excited about. And that's a pretty substantial portion of folks that come in. And then the third category is people that are just trying to make a little bit of extra money on the side. Maybe it's a hobby or they're amateurs at something, and so they'll sell something on Etsy or eBay, or they'll go to weekend swap meets and sell things there. Artists, we love them because they add spice to the community and they know how to make things. They were taught with their hands how to make things, and so they add a lot of knowledge, tacit knowledge to the community. They're also a lot more entertaining. They'll come at a tool, and instead of saying, I want to make this and I'm going to use that tool, they'll look at the tool and say, I wonder what I can do with this tool, which tends to break them, but they break them in interesting ways. And then we have the tinkerers, which is a catch-all category. That's, if I need something welded or I need to fix a drawer or something fairly simple, We call that a tinkerer. And then students. And the students are everything from an 8-year-old all the way up to an 80-year-old lifetime learner and everything in between. So those are the kind of the categories. It's a very diverse group of people.
でそれの
What would be the percentage of each segment that you just talked about?
So it's probably 40% entrepreneurs in those three categories, and then probably 20% students, and then kind of the rest is broken up between the artist and the hobbyist. So it's heavy on the entrepreneurial front.
でビジネス上はやっぱりそういうなんて
Business-wise, then, people who want to start up their companies are the type of people who you'd like to increase the most, do you think? Do you want the percentage of entrepreneurs to increase?
Well, I like it where it is, maybe even a little bit less. I'd like to see more hobbyists and more artists and students in the mix. Because again, they add a lot of really interesting projects and things that they're trying to do. So I'm kind of happy with where we're at.
それはやっぱりそのある種こう趣味で
Because the hobbyists or the entrepreneurs and the artists create a diversity that is very important for your environment. Is that it?
Exactly. If you had all entrepreneurs, it would create this kind of pressure cooker of everybody's trying to launch to a particular date, and what's the size of the market, and how am I going to get my message out, and so forth, where artists and students don't have those concerns. And so it's nice to have that mix of people there. And then sometimes, you'll operate in different categories. So, there may be an entrepreneur, but on the side, they've got a hobby, and so they'll come in and play with drones instead of working on their entrepreneurial gig.
僕ちょっとウェブ
Well, I've checked your website yesterday, and in Detroit, in March, there was an event calendar, and I took a memo of that. My mixer knows, but it seems quite interesting. There's a drone meetup on the 9th. On the 14th, a concept coffee and pie day, a pie social event. What's this? What's this pie day?
15, right? 315,
Yeah.
3.1527. It's pi.
I see.
Yeah, it's Pi Day.
でみんなでパイ食べる
All
ん
the
ですね
geeks
これ
come out on Pi Day.
これ何やるんですかこの
What do you do on this pie day?
なるほどなるほどいいですねこれ
That's interesting. And so the members get together, eat pies together.
Yes, all the geeks got together and ate pies.
なるほどとかですね
And another thing, ladies' night is on the calendar. That was 24th of March, ladies' event, right?
Geeky ladies are hot.
なるほどみたいななんか非常
I'll say, very interesting. Lots of interesting events. And you said that there was to be a great dating event. I guess that's true.
Holiday night is a lot of fun.
ねだからなんかそういう意味ではな
So yes, in that sense, I guess you can say that they're very entertaining. And I think it's a good thing that you can start from that entertaining aspect. So it's a socializing, entertaining events as well. That's a very important aspect, right?
We actually describe ourselves as a experience-based, transformative retailer. So the experience base is you want to give people a wonderful experience while they're there, hopefully then leading them to pick up new skills and potentially new opportunities. Transformative is a particular class of experience service offering, and that's where you move somebody from where they are today to someplace where they want to be in the future. And of course, retail means retailer. So we are an experience-based transformative retailer. And again, a lot of people come in and they think it's all about the tools. And you can't build an experience-based transformative retailer if you're focused on the tools. you've got to focus on the community, which is why we have all of these interesting and fun events. So Kevin Kelly has come and spoke a couple of times, and we have book night where we'll bring in authors and do discussions. We'll have the transhumanists or the Humanity Plus folks will come in like once a quarter. They'll have an event, a bio-curious event, every month, Internet of Things, wearables, a women in health tech. I mean, these are it's part of a community. You've got this ongoing series of evening events that will attract people that they'll meet and create this unique community of creatives that then can go off and do interesting things together.
なるほど。で、
When was it? The very first overseas event or the opening entity was in Munich, and that's when?
The last week, actually.
あ、そうなんですね。
Yeah, it was just this month.
なるほど。
And that was with the Technical University of Munich. There's an entrepreneurial organization called Entenheimer TUM, TUM, Technical University of Munich, that's funded by one of the wealthiest women in the world. She's a BMW shareholder. And then BMW funded like 300 memberships as well. So that funded that location. It just opened, so up and running.
海外で展開するにあたって
For this overseas deployment, how should I put it? Any particular things that were different or any different challenges that you might expect, things that are different from your U.S. deployment? Do you have that anticipation?
Yes. I mean, this is another reason why, and particularly in international context, we look for strong partners. Because even though, we believe, and I think it's fairly well proven, that making things is fundamental to what it means to be human. I mean, the opposable thumb, the first thing we did was build tools, and the tools we use to make things. And Carl Jung talks about it, and Maslow talks about it, and Hegel talks about it. So making things is fundamental to what it means to be human. It's not what it means to be American, it's what it means to be human. But how that plays itself out is going to vary within the local context, within the local national context. And so, I don't understand German making. I don't understand Japanese making. So we need to have a local partner that will help contextualize the parts of what we're doing in the Maker movement and then make it appropriate for the country that we're in. Again, with an eye toward the reality that making is fundamental to what it means to be human. And so we may not be making now. Most Americans don't. But they will self-identify as makers in very high percentages. In other countries, they will still be makers, but they may not self-identify as that yet. It's coming.
ちょっと僕
That Ford example that you mentioned, that partnership, what I couldn't really understand is this. That's Detroit, right? TechShop Detroit. Things that come out of TechShop Ford. Ford has titles in terms of patents. Ford has the rights to what will come out of a TechShop. Could you explain that? Because I wasn't really clear about that. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so Ford has the rights to anything that their employees come up with. It's a standard employment contract, at least in the U.S. But Ford is a big believer in open innovation, and it's, as are we. So we don't take a piece of intellectual property. You own what you make. You own your own intellectual property. We just provide the tools. And Ford is a big believer in that. And the location is open to any other automotive company in the world. So General Motors and Chrysler comes through. BMW spent a lot of time on site trying to learn what Ford was doing. And the intellectual property lead at Ford has created an on-ramp system for capturing intellectual property from outside of Ford that is the best in the automotive industry. And so when I asked him, like, why are you allowing this to be an open innovation? And he says, well, Mark, I'm a car guy and I want cars to get better, and I believe open innovation will help make that happen. And so I'll compete not on the ideas, I will compete on how quickly and easily it is for the ideas to be monetized and brought into Ford. And it's a very forward-looking approach to open innovation and what it can mean.
なるほど。今まで多分いろんなその
I see. I understand that there are various partnerships progressing. I wonder if you have any particular types of partners that you are reluctant to partner with the potential partners. Is there any criteria as to who's attractive, who's not?
They self-select, right? We're pretty crazy, very dedicated to the open concept. And so those who are closed and those who aren't interested in what they're doing, they don't call. Then when we have the conversation, when somebody does call, we spend a lot of time talking through what the values are in the maker movement. I mean, the big part of my book is about the 9 core values within the maker movement. And they have to buy into those values in order for them to become a partner. So it's one of the most important components in the conversation.
でそれをなんていうんですかね。
And how should I put it? So there's 9 core values. If they're shared with a certain company, how do you persuade them? Is it becoming more easier to talk with them? At least in the U.S., do you think that there are more companies that share those core values? Do you think?
It's getting easier. We're 9 years into this, and we've got 8 locations, and we now have kind of the economic impact. So the government agencies are getting very excited. I've got like a couple dozen governors across the United States are now talking to us about opening locations. Because here's why. The 3 locations in the Bay Area alone have created $12 billion in incremental shareholder value from members launching companies, $2 billion in annual sales, $200 million in annual salaries from 2,000 jobs. The state of California at the 10% California state tax is pulling $20 million out from employee pay on an annual basis from jobs and companies launched coming out of TechShop. We didn't spend $20 million opening the 3 locations. So this is one of the most efficient and effective jobs engines I've ever seen. And with the Ford example, it helps to unlock the cognitive surplus within a major corporation. And then it becomes a public good in the process. So like in St. Louis, we did a partnership with a developer. And developers are an important component in what we're doing. They've become major partners for us in like 4 different locations. And then Washington University in St. Louis funded a big piece, and then Boeing, Monsanto, and Purina, other big Fortune 100 companies are funding it. So between the city or the state, in combination with large corporations and universities, we're starting to see people come at us very, very quickly.
You mentioned the importance of prototyping and how funding was received for Square by prototyping. For the fabrication of the prototype, I understand that you're offering the environment for this, and you can see that what can be achieved through a prototype. But beyond that, whether it's a viable business or not, you have to build up a supply chain. And I guess that in a different sense, you'll have to do work that you've never done before. Under these circumstances, is there any kind of a support mechanism in place?
We call it hardware because it's hard. It's difficult to launch a hardware company. It doesn't scale like a software company where you just launch another server on AWS or a Fujitsu cloud. This is hardware. And we're still in the early days, so the service providers that would allow you to get to 1,000 units, 5 years ago were completely non-existent. They're becoming more available. But it's one of the biggest problems right now in this whole movement is the first 1,000 problem. But we're in discussions with some major manufacturing companies about what their future looks like within this new distributed manufacturing context and how they might be able to play an important role in enabling that. And I think you're going to see a number of folks start kind of helping solve that. Now, already, having said that, that's the kind of where we're going. 5 years ago, there was no such thing as a hardware accelerator. Right? There were zero. There were probably 1,000 software accelerators around the globe. It seemed like every telecommunications company had like 10 spread out. Zero hardware accelerators. Well, there are now 6. 3 of them are in the Bay Area. There's a window of opportunity here, right? There are 1,000 software accelerators spread out all over the globe. There are 6 hardware accelerators, all in the United States, 4 of them with direct connections to Shenzhen. There will eventually be hundreds of hardware accelerators with extensions to manufacturers around the globe. But nobody's doing that right now. It's a huge window of opportunity.
なるほど。で、そういった領域にも
And gradually, TechShop will be entering into those areas?
We probably will not do that ourselves. We're very friendly with all of the current hardware accelerators. It's a completely different business. I think we'll just be friends with many of them and encourage them to co-locate and work together. 3 of them launched within 5 blocks of our location in San Francisco purposely, so that they didn't have to buy equipment. They could launch their accelerator and send their teams to TechShop to get going.
で、やっぱりその最初に
At first, we talked about the fact that we wanted to start a Panasonic of the 21st century or the Sony of the 21st century, but people are reluctant to do that, or people tend to think that's impossible for myself to do that. But if we lower the barriers, it'd be nicer. Under those circumstances, what do you think would be the message that you'd like to disseminate to encourage people to come to TechShop? How would you induce people to come to TechShop? Because if you set the goal too high, now people may want to change their careers, so they may commit themselves to that, but that alone will not create a large number of people coming to you.
So let me tell you the story about Tina Albenlock. So we've had a number of accidental entrepreneurs where they come in, they learn how to do something, and they accidentally start a company. So Tina came in on a Wednesday, took the laser cutter class, and we tell them in the class, you need to practice what you just learned within the next 2 days. So she was trying to figure out, what am I going to make on Friday in my 2-hour block at the laser cutter? And on Thursday, she got a call from her sister-in-law. And her sister-in-law said, you need to come by on Saturday to Bobby's birthday party. And so Tina says, okay, are you going to do cupcakes? Because that was the thing during that time, is to do cupcakes instead of a big cake. And she says, yeah, we're going to do cupcakes. Like, great, give me the names of the other kids that are going to be there, and I will make cupcake toppers out of bamboo with each of the kids' names. So this is like a 7 or 8-year-old kid. All 7, 8-year-old kids like to see their name physically instantiated in something. And so she shows up on Saturday, and everybody gets a cupcake topper. And what happened was, at the end of the party, the parents came, and little Bobby goes to mom and says, look what I got. And she says, that's nice, but your 2 sisters don't have one. And so they went to Tina and said, I'll give you $20 if you make one for the 2 sisters. I'll give you $40 for that. She walked out of that birthday party with $400 in orders not being in business. She then had to get a business license and open a bank account and so forth. Well, she did $800 the next weekend, and then $1,600, and then $3,200, and then she launched an Etsy website that became so popular that when they started texting her with all of her orders, her BlackBerry was burning out inside of 4 hours. She disappeared for a while, and then she came back, and I asked her, Tina, where have you been? She says, well, my husband and I, when we got married, we couldn't afford a honeymoon, so we just took the last 6 months to travel around the globe. And she's making a couple $100,000 a year running her own little business that she started accidentally. That's not a bad outcome, right? And so to be more radical, because that's my job, quit your jobs. Stop working for somebody else. 200 years ago, we all worked for ourselves. We were on a farm. 97% of us were self-employed. And I don't agree with Karl Marx and Engels and others, but working for somebody else, you can't really reach the highest pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy unless you've got a lot of autonomy. And sometimes you get that in a company, sometimes you don't. Deloitte, the consulting firm, has already estimated in the United States 50% of us are going to be working for ourselves by 2030. Most people will not work for large corporations in the future. You're going to be working for small mom and pops that are doing distributed manufacturing. We already know this is true because this is a trend that's already started. Most of the jobs, all the growth in the United States in the last 20 years have come from small companies. The layoffs have come from the large companies. So we're encouraging, and this is starting to happen. Vivek Wadhwa, one of the gurus in the Silicon Valley, is telling his friends that are graduating, don't take a job with a big company, go take a job with an interesting startup, because that's where the fun is. That's where the autonomy is. That's where the impact is. That's where you pick up skills that are useful for the future. And so it actually begins to beg the question, why are you going to school? We've had a couple of people who have decided not to go to school and instead learn how to make things and launch companies. One of them got accepted to MIT and didn't go. He's now a multimillionaire, and in a few months, he's going to turn 21. Not a bad outcome. I don't recommend it for everybody, by the way. But this is the new world. This is a completely different, the ability to design, develop, and manufacture something in quantities large enough to be self-sustaining is within your grasp.
そうなんですよね。お話としてはね、本当にそう。
Well, it's exactly as you say, but still, does anyone want to quit their jobs immediately tomorrow? Well, there was one person who had the hands up, but that's someone special. It's quite difficult to go that far. There are difficulties.
So start part-time. Don't do it full-time. Come in, learn how to do something, pursue a little bit on the side, an avocation of some kind. And it'll inform your job as well as maybe open up other opportunities. You don't have to quit your job to be able to play.
なるほど。今例えばそのテックショップ
Right now in TechShop, getting back to that schedule, there was a fashion seminar. And I realized that you're involved in fashion as well. And I suppose that there's going to be a lot of different domains where people are going to be fabricating things. Are there any interesting domains that you see right now?
Well, I love fashion, the mix-up of fashion and the Internet of Things, where what you're wearing has some kind of other use as a fascinating area. I'm also particularly interested in medical devices and 3D printing as a method for quickly developing a prototype in the medical field. But again, one of the fascinating things about the space is the tools are completely domain agnostic, right? They don't care what you use them for. And as a result, the variety of projects that are coming through is just mind-blowing. I started tweeting because the projects were so crazy. I remember, like, one of the first times I tweeted, I was sitting at my desk, and this guy's walking down the hallway. And he was like, I'm so glad I found you guys. I can't believe it. Like, where else am I going to be able to work on and store my lunar lander? Good question. Where else are you going to go to work on your lunar lander? Like, what in the world? So I went down the hallway. I was like, what do you mean a lunar lander? It's like, oh, I'm working on a Google X Prize, and we're doing a lunar lander. Like, oh, okay, he's serious. Yeah, then another guy, staff goes, you got to meet. I think his name was Andy. And so I go over and I meet Andy, and I was like, what are you working on? It's like, I'm working on a desktop diamond manufacturing device. And I giggled, like, what? A desktop diamond manufacturing device. Oh, okay. How does it work? And he says, it's easy. I'm like, well, no, it's not. If it were easy, we'd all have one, right? So he's crazy. The question is he crazy in a good way or a bad way? And I'm looking at this aluminum block that's got random gouges in it from where the CNC tool did things it wasn't supposed to. I go, well, okay, if it was so easy, what is this? He says, well, this is my pressure chamber. And I'm going to drive this to 9 atmospheres and pump hydrogen in this hole and methane in this hole and energy from a used magnetron from a microwave, and diamonds are going to fall out. I was like, yeah, maybe. Or you may just have a bomb. So it's going to just blow up. Well, it turns out he had 2 degrees in physics and started a diamond tool deposition company that had gone public. And so the diversity of projects they're in is reflective of the community that you're in. It's the entire community shows up. And they're working on some really crazy stuff.
なるほど。じゃあここら辺でちょっと。
I see. Maybe we can take some questions from the floor. Any questions, anyone? Yes, I see a hand over there. Over there. Thank you. My name is Yokota. About manufacturing or makers, you showed us some of the successful examples. Were they mostly the individual efforts or the team efforts?
It's a combination. The bigger projects like the motorcycle, that was a team. But like the lamp was an individual effort. Oru kayak was maybe 2 people. So it varies depending on kind of the complexity of the project and the skill base of the person that's there. But again, one of the nice things there is you can start off as an individual working on a project, discover that you don't have all the skills you need, and you actually start hiring people or getting co-founders from the community. I remember this one day I walked in and a young lady came up to me and says, thank you for building TechShop in San Francisco. I lost my job yesterday, and I decided I'd come in and pick up some skills and try to find another job. And I literally walked in, took the silk screening class, and at the end of the class was offered a job here at TechShop from a startup that needed somebody that knew how to silk screen. And so you can very rapidly build teams to make just about anything.
大丈夫ですか?
That answers your question? Yes, thank you. Any other question? Yes, that person at the very back. Any plans of establishing TechShop in Japan? Conversely, if you are going to establish one in Japan, what's the size of membership that is needed to break even? In other words, what is the critical mass? TechShop? If I could answer part of your question. Although the dates are not yet decided, Fujitsu partnership, under the partnership with Fujitsu, there will be TechShop Japan as well.
I don't have an announcement to make yet, but we are actively
あれそういう会じゃないよ。あれ
talking to people in Japan.
聞かなかったことしてください。
Okay, forget what I said. Oh, really? Okay. So forget what I said. So what's the size of the membership that you need at one location to justify setting up an establishment?
It varies from city to city. Our estimate for Tokyo is between 800 and 1,200 members, depending on the infrastructure cost to do the build out. So you have to model each one separately, but about 800 on the low end, 1,200 maximum on the high end. It's good. It's a good question. It takes a community to make something like this happen.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you.
他に
Are there any other questions? We have a dangerous person. And please wait for the microphone. Thank you very much for the very enjoyable presentation. I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to just limit myself to 2 questions if I can. If it's fine with Mike. どうぞご自由に。Then my first question is in regard to the laser cutter. You said that it was very addictive. That's a very fascinating machine. But with the evolution of technology, are there any machine areas that you're looking forward to and where possibilities may expand? What's the area where you're looking forward to the most in terms of machines?
So there's actually a fairly non-obvious answer to that question. It's software-based. So currently, when you design something, there's some basic design tools. So you can learn one tool really well and you're good. But then you have to use a different computer-aided manufacturing software depending on the material that you want to use. So it turns out, for whatever reason, if you want to do it out of metal, you have to learn one CAM package. If you want to do it out of plastic, it's a different CAM package. If you want to do it out of wood, it's another CAM package. And so it turns out if you're trying to do something across 4 or 5 different types of materials, you have to learn 4 or 5 different computer-aided manufacturing pieces of software. Well, that's just insane. Like, we now have printers. We have this thing called PostScript from Adobe, and it doesn't matter what printer, it just works. And so that was one of our biggest conversations with Autodesk early on was, thank you for your software, thank you very much. Now fix the CAM problem, because that is the biggest rate limiter right now from our creative community launching cross materials. So the thing I really want to see is this CAM package solved. And Autodesk is working on it. They just spent like $400 million buying one of the largest CAM manufacturers in the world with the objective to be able to make it go cross, domains. So great question, non-obvious answer.
ありがとうございます。2つ目の質問は、
Thank you. My second question is in regard to the fact that you have plans to broaden your activities throughout the world. But you've talked about a lot of cases of what can be done in a single tech shop. If we connect all of the tech shops throughout the world, then is there going to be something that will be possible as a result of this global connectivity? Is there any vision that you have of anything new that can be possible as a result of this global connectivity of tech shops?
I believe that a substantial segment of the economy of making things is going to become local, sustainable, customized, and personal. Because if you can buy a desk that was built at the right height for your knees and that had used material that was produced locally by an artist you collaborated with to create some intricate, inlay, and it only cost you another 20% or 30% more because robots are doing the work, why would you buy a standard desk at a local IKEA? The answer is you wouldn't unless you really needed to save that last 30%. And I believe that's going to happen with fashion, with clothing, with hardware, with all kinds of things. You're going to buy a watch from a local watch manufacturer, and you'll know them, and you'll inform them what it is, how you want your watch made. And I think that could be 10, 15, 20, 30% of the manufacturing economy. So it's distributed, it's local, it's sustainable, it's customized, and it's personal. And that's being driven by artificial intelligence, robotics, distributed manufacturing technologies, advanced manufacturing technologies. And then you layer in the artist community and the design community. And we end up in a completely different kind of space. And we're seeing that in the United States after the 2008 downturn, people are buying fewer shirts, but the shirts that they buy are more expensive, have higher quality, and often come with a story of some kind. And so we're living more intentionally, and by living more intentionally, it's being enabled by this new manufacturing revolution. So I believe we're going to move into a completely different space. So yes, we'll have 1,000 locations globally. It'll be enabled local entrepreneurs to create custom, personalized projects and products for people within their community in ways we've never seen before. Or we have seen it, it just was 200 years ago, and it was much more expensive.
よろしいでしょうか。ありがとうございます。ちょっと一つだけ
Just one thing that I'd like to ask about. For example, if you bought a refrigerator, then perhaps there was about 5 or 6 manufacturers from which you could select from. That was the only choice that was available for a refrigerator up until now. But even for refrigerators, do you think that options will increase more and more? Will we be able to live in an era where we can have more choice, even in a thing even when we're selecting refrigerators?
I checked recently on the General Electric website how many colors and finishes I could get my refrigerator. It's 7. Really, 7. Like white, black, yellow, stainless steel. I don't know how to get to 7. That's insane. Like, why would I only have 7 choices? When I could get a local artist to do a veneer on it for a couple $100, they could come in and completely modify it, and they could put my kid's entire life history laser etched in a nice piece of wood that sat on it that matched the rest of my cabinets. Why would I not? Why would I not do that? One of the stories I tell, when I became a senior project manager, it was like I finally made a certain economic threshold. So my wife and I went out and bought a furniture set from Ethan Allen, a big manufacturing company, and we spent $12,000. And it's got a nice table and cabinets and so forth. And I felt good about that for 6 months or a year. Certainly less time than it took me to pay it off. So that's what I did 20 years ago. If I were to do it today, my wife and I would work together in the wood shop and we would make it. It would cost us about $1,000, and we would have created an heirloom that I would have been proud to see every time I walked in the door. And okay, maybe I wouldn't do it, but I'd hire an artist that I knew in the Silicon Valley who had a furniture business and could make it for $13,000. Yeah, I'd pay an extra $1,000 to have it made to my specification with my customization, and I get to be involved in the process. And we know psychologically that if you're involved in the process in any way, you ascribe to yourself, I made that, even though you didn't. But if you were involved in the process, you say, I made that. So this is a table that I made, that I was involved in. And economically, we already know at a minimum, if you're involved in any kind of activity, in any little bit, you value the object at twice the going rate for the regular manufacturer.
そのいわゆる
So the area of handmade manufacturing, conventionally you wouldn't want to create your own refrigerator, but building your motorcycles, you won't try that. So you're saying that the scope of that is going to expand as well. So the point is here, the home appliances manufacturers have been focusing on home appliances, and they were the only source for us, but that's going to change, you think?
No, it varies by category. So you pick one that actually is very difficult. The compressors for refrigerators turn out to be very high tech and very difficult to get right, and there are very few people who actually know how to do that well. And they don't currently sell you the compressor as a component. So it'd be difficult to get into the appliance manufacturing. But that's not the interesting part anyway. The interesting part is the veneer and what it looks like. The interesting part is an API that you can plug into that do interesting things with your refrigerator. And they're working on, GE's already building that API. Other categories will completely fall to the local person. Motorcycles might be one of them, because you can buy an engine off the shelf. You can buy a transmission. You can now form you can do there's a whole cafe racer thing. So I think that category is interesting. So it's going to vary from category to category. You're not going to build your own aircraft, right? It's too big, but there are nice chunks of the economy that I think are going to give way to the customization, personalization piece.
なるほど。その時にだからいわゆる今その
If I could dig in further, the so-called big players, for example, GE in the US, those manufacturers, would those companies see the encroachment of their business domains, do you think? So eventually, maybe they won't disappear altogether, but their business is going to shrink. Is that the direction, do you think? Or do you think that companies like GE will have different values that will enable them to survive? And if that's the case, why is that possible?
So GE is a really interesting case. Beth Comstock, their chief marketing officer, I think is one of the most brilliant executives on the planet right now. And the reason I believe that is because she's making some very interesting bets around open innovation and specifically this play. So they've partnered with two companies that most large CMOs would never have heard of. Corky, which is, I believe, properly named because it's kind of a weird company. Ben Kaufman's the CEO. And what they have is an open platform where anybody can submit an idea, and then the community, upwards of 2,500 people or more, will iterate on it until they've refined a specification, and then Ben and his team choose which one they'll actually make. Well, GE invested in Ben's company, a very substantial amount of money, and are now using that as a front-end process for helping to develop a specification, which is fascinating. Again, I come out of hardware, new product development, and we would spend 6 months to a year developing a specification, and you do all kinds of human research, human-centric design, and you do your focus groups and so forth. This thing takes 6 months to a year. GE did the spec in 60 days using this process. 60 days. They didn't have an idea of what their in-window air conditioner was going to look like on November 1st of 2013. Here's the killer. And it was on the shelf in volume by Mother's Day of the following year. 6 months. Start to finish. 6 months. Major new platform. So this is kind of GE's response. And the other investment they made is with First Build out of Louisville. Well, First Build is actually out of Phoenix, but they've opened a micro manufacturing location in their appliance division to launch new appliance ideas. So she's embracing this, and who better to understand how to build a micro manufacturing location than somebody like a GE or a Samsung or a Fujitsu or a Flextronics. So I think there's opportunity to embrace it. Ignoring it would be insane.
なるほど。そうですよね。あと5分ぐらいって言ってたんで、
We only have about 5 minutes remaining, so perhaps we can have one or two more questions. Are there any other questions? Yes, we have someone. In regard to the American startups, there are startups that can begin with $300 or $500 and with some warehouse space and Wi-Fi, then you can start. But then there's the 3D printers or the tools or quite expensive facilities that you need. So you're probably investing about several $1 million, and yet you have people that can use it for $125 a month. And I'm wondering how it pays off. Would you care to comment on that?
It's positive across the locations have been open for a year. We've found a way to be able to make money at the business. And it isn't just memberships, it's also the training, and it's also some other things that we're building out. It's not a software company. I mean, it's not incredibly profitable, but it's profitable enough. And we'll build that. I mean, our objective right now is to build the brand and build the locations out and then add revenue streams in as we move forward. And they will become quite profitable as we add these new revenue streams in. We've already identified some of them. Our objective right now is to build the network out as quickly as we can. It's a good question.
これからまだまだなんかその新しいそのマネタイ
So for monetization, I suppose that you'll be finding new forms of monetization from here onwards as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There are a bunch of very obvious ways of increasing the revenue. But our economic impact is becoming so strong that we're getting other people to fund the core location. And so, in a sense, the cost to TechShop to open a new location is $0, right? Because somebody else funds it. And so the return on investment is infinite at that point.
大丈夫ですか？じゃあ最後もう一個。はい。
Maybe one final question? Yes. This is not my question, but this morning, a Serbian Palilo, I met this person for the very first time. I talked with him over Skype. And I told him that I'm going to be meeting Mark Hatch. Do you have any questions or do you have any ideas? And TechShop was new to me. But anyway, this Serbian guy sent a chat box. I'm going to read it.
Watched a few TechShop video, and I must say that the idea is amazing. But I do have a few remarks. Firstly, I think that TechShop workshops are suitable for making your first prototype of product. But if someone wishes to start mass production, he would still need some capital and bigger facility. で、若林さんも
And Wakabayashi-san, I think, asked a similar question, right? I think. And this Serbian talks about his hypothesis. I'm going to read that part.
Therefore, I believe that the next step for TechShop would be to get in contact with investors and connect them with the TechShop members ということです。それで、secondly, TechShop facilities are now available only within the US. So I would ask Mark if they are planning on opening new facilities anywhere else in the world. ということで、まあ彼のために
So my question is, do you have any plan to open in Serbia, former Yugoslavia? Do you have any plans to go there?
We have our European partner is the largest retailer in Europe, Adeo Group. We're working with Leroy Merlin. It was a 5-unit deal, and they're opening 5 locations. They want to do dozens beyond that. And we'll look to them to decide where it makes sense to open in Europe. As far as the previous question, yes, working capital is a very real issue when you deal with hardware. It's not so much on the software side. And so managing your cash and taking a 500-unit order instead of a 2,000-unit order is important. You need to understand what kind of capital you have available. And yes, one of the potential revenue streams longer term is to collaborate with a bank to help solve the working capital problem that's very evident in our locations. Great couple questions there.
大丈夫でしょうか。
Thank you very much, special information.
Thank you.
はい、ということで、今日はちょっと
With that, this evening has passed by very quickly, but we've heard many interesting things. We hope that this will be helpful for your future business and for your future lives. And I believe that you must have received a very positive impact. Once again, let's offer Mr. Hatch a round of applause. Mr. Hatch, Mr. Wakabayashi, thank you very much. Let's offer a round of applause for Mr. Wakabayashi, who moderated this session as well.